Welcome back to week 2. I'm Misty and this is our Into the Woods Sew Along, and this week we're going to be tackling our grove of trees. We already cut these, but I did want to mention again, if you haven't already done your cutting, the large simple wedge template does make this very, very easy, and I highly recommend it. But if you don't have this or don't want to invest in this template, there is a link in the description where you can print off a paper template for free, so be sure to get that if you still need it. And then we just need to make sure we have all of our pieces to get started with this project. We're not making blocks here. This is just a row assembly, so it makes it really, really quick and simple. And to do that, you're going to need 7 red. Sorry, I'm going to do that part again. Makes it really, really easy. And to do that, you're going to need 7 red wedge trees, 7 black, and 14 to 16 of your white. And I say that, I'll get into that a little bit more. You need at least 14. I have a preference. I prefer to have 16 of those. And there's plenty of your background yardage to do it either way, whichever one suits you better. We're also going to cut out 7 3 1/4 by 1.5 inch strips for our trunks. You can see them here in the quilt. So you'll need those. And then we're going to need our pieces for in between the trunks. So you can see here, it starts with a little piece. This is a 3 1/4 by 3 1/2. So you have to watch since it's only a 1/4 inch different, but it is a rectangle. And then here we have 3 1/4 by 6 1/4. So you're gonna need 2 of these small ones per row and 6 of these larger rectangles per row. And that's really all you need. So let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna make this row that you see here. So as you can see, one of the rows starts with a red tree and one starts with a black. So on ours, we're gonna go ahead and start with a red tree. So I have that here. And we're gonna start just by making sure our tree is pointing upward just like we want it in the quilt. And then we're gonna take one of our background wedges. These are exactly the same size, they're cut exactly the same way, and we're just going to lay these right sides together. Now, let's talk a little bit about matching up our trees because it can be a little bit confusing. Since we're not dealing with squares, we're not going to go corner to corner with our wedge. We're actually going to have the tip of our tree hang over just about 1/4 inch. And while you're getting the hang of this, you can totally come with your ruler and check and see. And I can see that's just about 1/4 inch that's peeking over. And I like to fold this back and kind of do the same thing. We look pretty good there as well. And so the reason that we're doing that is because we want our seams to still nest and lay as straight as possible. And if we actually went point to point, these would get a little bit off as we started sewing. So it's just an eyeball situation. And this is one of those practice really does make, not perfect because we're not trying to be perfect. Practice does make better here. So we're just gonna take some time. And I wanna be totally honest, when I first did these wedge trees, I had to use my handy seam ripper quite a few times, and that's okay. But I'll talk you through it, if we see a mistake that's not something I would be happy with, I'll pick it out and we'll just make it work. And so don't be afraid if you have to try and try again. So let's go ahead and take this to the machine. And we're gonna line this up. Again, I'm just eyeballing. I've gotten pretty good at this now for that 1/4 inch. And then we're just going to sew down the side here. Make sure that we're staying all lined up. There we go. And then now we can fold this open. Ooh, and that looks beautiful. That turned out so nice. You can see as we fold our seams back, that's gonna lay really nice. So I actually just sit here at the machine and I'm going to sew these one after the other. Some people prefer to sew these in sets like this. I think that's actually how the pattern is written, is to just sit and sew sets together. You can totally do that. For me, as you know, I like to chain piece. I don't like to have to get up from my machine too much. So I'm just gonna grab my piles here and I'm just gonna pull them closer. And I'm just gonna add one after the other at the machine. So next up, we have a black tree. Remember, we're gonna alternate colors, red and black, in between our background white trees. And so again, I'm just gonna fold this over and we're gonna make sure we have that 1/4 inch overhang. And we're just gonna take this and sew our 1/4 inch seam. I always take a few stitches at the beginning there and then line up my bottom. Sew down the side. So again, I'll roll that back. That's still looking so nice. The thing that you want to look for is when your two trees come together. You can see these are lining up and I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And so from the bottom of my trees to where the tip of the white background is, you can see that there's plenty of space for me to come through with my 1/4 inch seam later. So those are the things that I'm watching for as I'm sewing all of my rows together. So up next, we're gonna add another background and we're just gonna keep going back and forth. And I do kind of finger press at the tip just because I wanna make sure that this is laying nicely. And actually, here's another little pro tip. Once you've sewn one that you're really happy with, when I lay this on, I can actually make sure that my point lines up exactly with that point. And so then I know my piece is in the same place as that last one, and I can be pretty confident that it's gonna work out and lay nicely. So now I've got that lined up. We're gonna take this and sew our 1/4 inch seam. Pause, line up our bottom edge, and just zoom down the side. There we go, and roll that back. That still looks so nice. And then we'll just keep adding. Red is up next. I'm using that same trick with my seam allowance down here at the bottom to make sure my corners match up. I don't know if you guys can see that. And then I have that 1/4 inch overhang here at the top. And I can just sew down. This one got a little off at the bottom. I'm actually gonna go ahead and take one more seam and see, because I still have plenty for my seam allowance here. This one is still right. This one might have just stretched a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and add one more, and as long as that one works out okay, I'm not gonna pull this one out. A lot of the times in quilting, we can just make it work and we can trim things off straight. As long as we have those seam allowances that we need. So you just need to remember here that you're alternating your print with your background so that our trees are always pointing up. That turned out really nice, so I'm just gonna keep going. I'm not gonna let that one little thing bother me. So we're just gonna add the next one. You can see I'm taking most of my time to just make sure everything is lined up as best as I can with that little bit of overhang. we're just going to keep going until we have 7 trees sewn together. All right, we're going to add our last tree. And then we can add the trunks. All right, these are all sewn together. And you can see we have our trees all in a row. And now what we need to do is we need to create this straight piece on the edge. Now, if you read in the pattern, they recommend taking one of your wedges and cutting it in half. And theoretically, this should work just fine. There's no reason that it won't. But for me, I tend to have way better luck if I just attach a whole wedge, sew it just like normal, and then come back and trim it. So that's how I'm going to show you. We're going to add this last background wedge to the front and the back, and then we'll bring it back here and we'll trim it off straight. Okay, so now you can see I've added a whole wedge to the start and the end of my row of trees. I'm actually going to go ahead and give this a nice good press. This is actually a block, or a row I should say, where I like to use best press or some starch just to kind of prevent stretching if you're interested. But I'm just going to go ahead and press this so everything is laying nicely and we don't have anything tucked, and our seams are all going where we want them. So I just kind of gently, again, you don't want to distort these wedges, but you do want to make sure that they are pressed nice and flat. There we go, that looks better. So now let me grab my ruler here. And I like to make sure that my bottom and my top edge are lined up. And so you can see I'm on this straight line down here and this 1/2 inch line down here. And I like to just go ahead and slide this over so that I have about a 1/4 inch of overhang. And I do that so that I make sure when I'm sewing all of this together, I'm not losing this bottom edge of my tree. And so I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. Again, double checking, making sure I'm as straight as I can be. Line this up a little bit more, because we only get to do this once, so we do want to be very accurate. we go. I think that looks good. I'm also checking my ruler on the ruler line since I have my row. I can make sure here I've got this 1/4 inch line and this 1/4 inch line, and everything is where I want it. Just want to be really thorough, and then I can trim that off straight. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, line up our row, go over by about 1/4 of an inch, check that we're lined up on the bottom, and I think we are good to go. It's a little farther than I'd like. There we go, and trim. There we go. So now we're going to go ahead and make the trunks for our trees. And so this is really simple straight sewing. We can set our tree tops aside for a moment, and we can pick up those background rectangles and the cute little tree trunks that we had cut earlier. And we're going to start with our 3 1/4 by 3 1/2. Then we can add one of our tree trunks. This is 1 1/2 by 3 1/4. And then we'll alternate until we get to the end of the row with a tree trunk and our 6 1/4 piece here, just to create that long strip that we need. So that's what I'm going to do. I just take all of these over to the machine with me, and I'm just going to add one after the other, starting with our smaller piece first. All right, so this is our last tree trunk. I'm going to add this on, and then we're going to finish off the row with that 3 1/4 by 3 1/2 inch rectangle. We start and end with that smaller piece, and we do that to make sure that our tree trunks end up in the middle of our trees. So then let's add that. Again, you do want to be careful, since this is just a 1/4 inch difference, that you have it turned the right way on this piece here. It should be 3 1/4 high and 3 1/2 wide. And that is the row of our tree trunks. So we're just going to press these really well. And I like to make sure, since we are dealing with black and white here, I kind of take my time on the pressing and make sure all of my seams are going in towards the trunk. I just don't want them to show through. So I just can lift and roll and make sure that my seams are going the way that I want them to. And after you've pressed it from the top, you can go back from the back side and make sure they're all going the way you want them to. Just always press from the top first. There we go. Let's flip these over. See how they're looking. Those look pretty good. This one's going a little crazy. Whoops. Now, for this particular part, I'm not pressing it anyway to have it line up, because we don't have to line these up with any other seams. But, like I said, I do want the seams to be hidden behind that black fabric. So there we go. Our row is all done, and now we can attach it to our tree tops. And so this is so fun. and we can just take this to the machine, lay this right sides together. I always put the trunks on top of the trees just because this has a little bit more body and gives me more to work with, and I don't have to worry about it getting any waves or anything like that in it. Now, with that being said, I do always like to make sure that I kind of pin my center one so that I know it's lined up. So I'm going to grab some pins here, and you can do that. We're just going to fold this guy in half. I know this one is the middle, so I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm just going to finger press a seam right here. And I just find on projects like this, it helps me keep everything lined up since there isn't a reference point for these tree trunks, just to have a few places where I've created a guide. And so here's my center, and then I know if I start at the top here and sew to this point, I should have everything lined up, and again on the second half. That's really the only pin I put in. And so we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to sew down our 1/4 inch. So we're coming up to that place that we pinned. I've actually pinned it out of the way so I don't have to take that out. I'm just gonna watch. You never want to sew over a pin, so take your time. You can always pull that out if you need to. We're just gonna readjust, make sure everything's lined up. And so I don't know if you can see here, this is that one tree where my bottom pieces, one of the pieces just kind of hung over a little bit more. So on this, I'm going to line up with my black piece because I still have my 1/4 inch there. And so I'm going to use that as my guide, which means I'm going to have a little bit extra red hanging over on this side. And then we're coming up to the end here. There we go. So now we can just press this nice and flat. And I do like to press my seams up towards the tree. Again, I just don't want those seams to show through my white background. So I'm just running my iron along the edge here. Oops. It's being a little difficult. Oh, you know why? My pin's still in there. I'm like, why isn't that folding back? Don't want to iron over that. There we go. This should be a little easier now. Okay. We can just roll those back. Oh, those look so nice. Love it. All right. So now all that's left on our rows of trees is to add the sashing strips to either side. And so those are just strips from our background that measure 1.5 by 11.5. So I'm just going to sew one of these to either side, just like so. go. And I can turn this around and do the other side. So you can see here, I do have a little bit of overhang, and I don't know if it's just my seam allowances were a little bit off, but I'm just, again, gonna line up with the edge of my trees because I know that's right. So actually, let's go ahead and take this and trim it off, just so I'm not dealing with that. We'll just make sure everything is straight. I've just got like just under a quarter inch there that I'm gonna get rid of. And then we can add our sashing strip. It's usually worth it to take the time and get rid of those little differences that we might find in our sewing. And as long as everything's square, we'll be good to go. There we go. And that is a complete row of trees. This is this top row that we've made here. You're going to repeat the exact same steps, except starting with a black tree for your bottom row. And then you will have 2 of these that you can set aside until we're ready to assemble this. So I hope you enjoyed making your rows of trees, and we'll see you next time for week 3.